Greetings in the name of the Most High Yahuwah and his Son Yahusha to the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. I am Brother Hiram, and I am bringing to you this day part 1 of the teaching series which I have entitled Put Away versus Divorce. Put Away versus Divorce. Now, if you haven't listened to the intro of this teaching series, please listen to that before you listen to this first part, because I believe it'll make more sense to you. So with historical context, the claim is that the problem Yahusha was addressing in his teaching on divorce and remarriage was that of men sending their wives out of their homes without divorce certificates. In other words, not giving their wives a proper divorce. I have yet to see any receipts for this claim. I have found nothing that attaches this practice to the original Hebrews that occupied the land in the days of Yahusha. Now, when I say I haven't seen any receipts, I have seen what people put forth. And what is often put forth as evidence is the modern day practice of Ashkenazi Jewish men. So I saw a video of a brother that was promoting this teaching, and he had a video that talked about the problem of Ashkenazi Jewish men in these modern times now. They would put a woman out, they would put a woman away, but they wouldn't give her a divorce certificate, so they weren't giving them a proper divorce, and they weren't able to be married again. And so the video I saw, is just very emotionally charged, and, you just really feel sorry for the women that are in the video because they talked about how miserable their lives are because they're just hanging in the balance. They can't move on with their life and get married again, because they didn't get a proper divorce from their husband. And so this is a Ashkenazi Jewish traditional practice of this modern time. To me, that's not receipts, because you can't tie that back to the original Hebrews in the land during Yahusha's time. You can only speculate that that's what was going on back then. Now, I have also heard claims of this practice taking place during medieval times. So this would be hundreds of years ago now, which would still relegate it to the Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews and not the original Hebrews. And especially not the original Hebrews in the land during the time of Yahusha. You can't cite things like this as evidence and then just tie it back to Yahusha's day and then just assume that that was going on back then and back there. What we do have receipts for is the historical debate between the rival Pharisaical schools that existed during Yahusha's time on the earth. You had the three schools, the three main schools, and they're named according to the teacher, so-called rabbi, that they would follow after. You had the school of Hillel, the school of Shammai, and the school of Akiva. Now, the school of Hillel, this was the most prominent and most popular of the schools. Their view concerning divorce and remarriage, they held the most popular view, and their view was based upon Deuteronomy 24, where it talks about if a woman finds no favor in the man's eyes. And so they based their view on that. And so they said that if for any reason a woman does not find favor in the eyes of her husband, he may put her away. He may divorce her. And Shammai, the school of Shammai, held a more conservative view. Now, Hillel, let me just add this. When we say any reason by which a woman would not find favor in the eyes of her husband, we're talking like burning the food. I mean, for any reason, pretty much. And you remember now that the Pharisees approach Yahusha and say that, can a man put away his wife for every cause, for any reason? So this was the teaching of the Hillel school of Pharisees. Now, Shammai, they were more conservative. Now, they said that it had to be something more serious because they based their view on the part in Deuteronomy 24 where it says that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness. And so what Shammai taught was that that uncleanness was a serious sin of a sexual nature. And so we already know that the Torah taught that if you just flat out commit adultery, that the remedy for that is not divorce. The remedy for adultery is death. And fornication as well, in the sense of not being found a maid when you get married, because the remedy for that is death as well. But if there is some serious sin of a sexual nature, less than that, that's where Shammai was in his judgment concerning divorce and remarriage. And then there is Akiba. Akiba was the most liberal of the three. And he taught that if you saw a woman that was better looking than your wife and you desired her, you can divorce your wife and marry that better looking woman. So, is it any wonder that Yahusha called these Pharisees blind guides, blind leaders of the blind, causing both to fall into the ditch, called them children of hell, called them snakes and vipers? He didn't have nice things to say about these men. But one thing that they all had in common was none of these schools had any conflict with the giving of the certificate of divorce. They all believed in that and taught that. And they prided themselves in being Moses' disciples. If you remember that, I believe it was in John 9 where Yahusha healed the blind man. And they said, we're Moses' disciples. You're his disciple. And so they strongly believed in the giving of the divorce certificate. They just disagreed on under what circumstances could you do it. Now, the reference I have for this is in the Mishnahs. Now, that is Mishnah Gittin 9. This is one chapter that is dedicated to all the painstaking little rules that they came up with regarding the giving of the bill of divorce. Just how you're to properly give it. Can you throw it from the second floor up down to the first floor? Or can you just drop it on the ground? Or do you have to have it right in her hand? Can you do this? I mean, it's surprising just how nitpicky they were in all these little minute details of the giving of the bill of divorce. So the whole point is that they had no conflict with the giving of the bill of divorce. Challenge questions. Where are the receipts for the claim that there was a problem with men sending their wives out of their houses without a divorce certificate? Now, I'm talking about in Yahusha's day. Where are the receipts? Now, I said earlier in this part of the teaching series that I have yet to see the receipts. And I challenge anybody to produce them for me because I haven't seen them. But where are they? That's the first challenge question. Where are they? What can you cite to prove that this was a problem during Yahusha's day? What kind of historical evidence do you have? Number 2, seeing that we do have receipts on what the Pharisees believed and taught during that time, why would Yahusha address them on an issue with which they had no conflict? If you read closely enough about Yahusha's interactions with the scribes and Pharisees, usually he was reproving, rebuking, and correcting them. And so seeing that divorce and remarriage was something that Yahusha addressed on multiple occasions, why would he address them on an issue with which they had no conflict. Because the Pharisees and scribes, they already believed and taught that you need a divorce certificate in order to put a woman away. So what would have been Yahusha's point in teaching that, if that's all he meant when he said putting away? If he only meant putting away a woman without a divorce certificate. Now, number 3, seeing that people feared being put out of the synagogue by the scribes and Pharisees. It's John chapter 9, verse 22. Again, this is where Yahusha healed the blind man, and his parents were afraid to own up totally and completely to it because they feared being put out of the synagogue. So seeing that the common people feared being put out of the synagogue, how could there have been a problem amongst the common people? So if, in case you want to say, well, the problem wasn't necessarily with the Pharisees and scribes, it was just with the common people. Well, how could there have been a problem among the common people with men sending their wives out of their houses without a divorce certificate if the common people feared being put out of the synagogue by the scribes and Pharisees? Because they wouldn't have put up with that. Now, they believed in the giving of the divorce certificate. They just disagreed on the circumstances under which it was to be done. So how could there have been, number 1, how could there have been a big problem with this with the scribes and Pharisees, seeing that we have receipts on what the Pharisees believed and stood for during that time? And then here in number 3, how could there have been a problem among the common people with men doing this, seeing that they feared being put out of the synagogue by the scribes and Pharisees? This is part 1 of the series, Put Away versus Divorce.